Okay, my name is Amar Bakshi. I'm doing the project How the World Sees America. And I'm 23 years old. I just got out of college last year, and I'm happy to talk to all of you guys for Vivian's class. In 3 days, I'm heading off to Turkey, and then I'm traveling around the world for the next 5 months, looking at how America is perceived globally. So the other countries are Lebanon, Syria, and then one other country in the Middle East, then South Korea, the Philippines, and Indonesia, and then Latin America, Colombia, Venezuela, and Mexico. So it's a 5-month thing taking me through to March, and I've already done it for the past 3 months in Pakistan, India, and England. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what I do in terms of the material I bring and how I get it all organized, how this project happened, and then what I think it means for journalism and for me personally, and then what types of goals I hope to achieve through it, including a sort of discussion of activism or whatever you want to call it. And then the final thing is, well, actually, no, that's it. All right, so the first thing is about the equipment I use and sort of how I go about doing what I do. A lot of well, first let me show you the camera. One sec, let's see if I can get this to you on the screen. I have this backpack, which contains everything I do. It's pretty small. It's probably like 25 or 30 pounds. No, probably a little bit more than that. And I have this HDV camera. I'll show it to you guys. There we go. So it's really small, and this contains everything I need, and it shoots pretty high quality. I have a tripod and a bunch of different microphones. I'll briefly show you that. Don't know if this is interesting at all to you guys. Alright, those are the setups that I have. So just this backpack is basically what I bring everywhere I go. And I pick countries and people and locations and themes pretty organically. I mean, a lot unfolds based on where I've been, who I've met, and what type of balance I want to strike. But I'd say that 30% of who I come into contact with is a consequence of sort of stories I've set up before. So for Turkey, I know the issue with the Kurds is burning, and the American support for that, that genocide bill with Armenia is a burning issue. So I've lined up some pretty intelligent contacts within those communities, and I've chosen cities that allow me to get at that, a couple of these big issues. Like I'm going to Diyarbakir in the south, which is where sort of the Kurdish capital of Turkey. And anyway, so I'm picking my itinerary around large themes, but then day by day I focus on sort of a different personality each day. So like one day it'll be a drag queen talk show host, one day it'll be a doctor in an Indian medical clinic. The way I set up those interviews, people often ask, is usually over the weekend I take stock of the contacts I have and talk to people like Vivian or like journalists in the countries I'm going to get a sense of what they think are some of the big and compelling themes. And I basically structure my week with 3 out of 5 interviews coming from discussions there and things I've set up beforehand. And then 2 out of those 5 basically coming by raw chance. I mean, who I end up meeting, where I end up staying. This project unfolds a lot like a backpacker's journey, even though I guess it is for, a big news organization. I think that is what makes it compelling. On the one hand, you guys see that, I'm fairly young, and I kind of show my track and lay it all out there for people to look at, which is different than a lot of the really terse, headline-driven front-page news that you're going to get, especially in foreign coverage, or often in foreign coverage. So this idea is to put a human face on these news stories, but also look beyond news and just look at the state of the world right now and how America fits into it. It's a broad topic, obviously, which is why this project could go on for quite a while. But it's also a way, I think, of getting U.S. readers, especially young ones, involved in international affairs, which is just something I personally think is pretty important, I think, as an immigrant son, and that I'd like to see pursued. So that's how I pitched the project. I pitched it originally to Fareed Zakaria at Newsweek, David Ignatius at the Washington Post, and Hal Strauss, who's at WashingtonPost.com, saying, I'm really interested in video. I majored in social theory and video. I'd like to do something that gets you inside the homes of people who are living through big events. So you don't just see the explosion, but you see, 3 months before or 8 weeks after, just the way life is in these places. And I'm not always going to just the big news centers, but for the next couple of months I am. So, what do I think this means for journalism? Well, I think that a lot of people these days talk about, you know, being open in terms, I think it's this whole postmodern thing of there is no truth. So some people say, well, it's fine to have opinion journalism, let it run rampant. And I think that, no. What's great about the web is it allows people to see process and pursue the sort of quest for truth or objectivity or whatever you want to call it as transparently as possible, with the realization you're not going to get there, but there's a lot that a journalist can do to show his reader where he's getting his sources, how he's getting them, like a press conference often. People say, this minister said it at this press conference, but if you saw what a press conference looked like, you'd laugh at the fact often that constitutes news, because it's, the most contrived artificial space. So what I'm trying to say here is I'm trying to give readers and viewers a glimpse back into the process by which my stories are constructed. And I hope that not only engages them in a long-term kind of way and invests a little bit in my journey, but also is as transparent as it can possibly be. So I'm also supplying a lot of the interview transcripts and things like that that I conduct along the way. On a related note, or sort of the same point as that, is that it's very interactive. I mean, I allow readers to help guide my itinerary. I meet up with a lot of them on the road. And I think that really allows for a pretty engaging experience of following or exploring or investigating. I don't know how that would work necessarily in like CIA coverage, but it certainly works when you're talking about perceptions around the world. So it's a chance for readers to get involved. I mentioned briefly the goals. It's to humanize a lot of the actors in world politics. It's to, in world affairs. It's to get young readers interested in the rest of the world. That's sort of what's fundamentally driving it. But I'm also interested sort of on an academic level of how you link text and video in a compelling way. I think online media often isn't sure what to do with its video and its text. Are they separate? Is it sort of like Discovery Channel videos and then straight news? Is there a way to blend them together to jump between text and video where one enhances the other? What type of multimedia experience can you create? I just emailed a guy who's doing some serious investigation on Second Life, that online virtual portal, and I just checked it out for the first time last night. It seemed relatively sparsely populated considering all the hype, but I guess there were like 35,000 people on it from around the world. And it was cool that you could use all these different multimedia facets to interact with people from around the world and share stories, literally talking through your machine. I mean, that I think is an exciting way that journalism can move towards these multimedia platforms and these various modes of delivering a message. And at the same time, you can personalize reporting in some cases without losing sort of that quest for objectivity or that quest for truth that I think drives journalism in whatever age. As far as activism goes, I think that the real focus of this project is to create dialogue, and to the extent that that's an activist act, great. And it's to show, both the outrages and the beauties of what America does do around the world. And often there are outrages, and often there are really wonderful things that America represents and does. And so this project aims at kind of showing them both. Currently, there's a lot of outrage, but that certainly motivates the project, but it doesn't rely on it to exist on those outrages. A post that I did was on a Coca-Cola factory in Plachimata, which is this, place in Kerala at the southern tip of India. And this plant reportedly sapped a lot of the groundwater, so farmers didn't have as much for their rice paddies, and it polluted it at the same time. So I interviewed Coke representatives, and I interviewed people in this in this town whose wells were destroyed, all talking about how America is perceived. And this is a place where you'd really say, oh, great anti-American spot. People are going to rail against America for what Coke did. And what I found was, there was a lot of antagonism towards Coke for what it had done, but a lot of hope that a company like Coke could develop jobs in a pretty rural space, and certainly no core animosity against the United States. Not from that village, which was interesting because Kerala's communists and a lot of other parties had used that event, the Plachimata ground wells sapping, to rally a huge amount of anti-American protests around the time of the Saddam Hussein hanging, and simultaneously formed an alliance between the Muslim League and the communists, which had been on and off for the past couple of decades. Anyway, I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but what this shows, I think, is that America comes across in really personal, specific ways, and you can't always tell from the big headlines what's really going on in like that town or that village where the Coke factory is involved, and it's always more complicated than I think it appears. In terms of personal experiences, I don't know if I want to put them all up on YouTube, but I mean, just in a nutshell, it's sort of like what any backpacker will probably feel. Getting lost in some strange person's house, smoking a cigarette and just feeling like, this is unlike any cigarette you've ever had before in your life because you're in some small town in England and, everything you take from anyone is kind of suspect. Really losing yourself to the world, which I think is largely what this project has been for me and hopefully what it is for the reader. So, I've talked for a long time. I hope this is somewhat helpful. You can call me or email me anytime. Vivian has my contact. And if you're ever anywhere where I am, I'd love to meet up with you. The website's WashingtonPost.com/America, and my email is just amar.bakshi at gmail.com. All right? Thanks a lot, and I look forward to your reactions.